Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Sense Crypto channel. As with you always, this is Rich doing another video today on XRP. So I hope you're all having a wonderful day today, wherever you are in this great world. We're gonna talk about XRP. And I gotta start with this. John Deaton slams Senator Warren of lobbying for banks, defends Bitcoin billionaires. So Deaton emphasized that less than 1% of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency transactions are used for illicit purposes, citing data from the UN Office on Drug and Crime. On the other hand, he showed that nearly $800 billion and $2 trillion of money laundering happens through banks every year, while naming traditional banks like HSBC, JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo as the primary offenders rather than cryptocurrencies. And it's good that he's pointing that out, because most of the money laundering in the United States happens at the traditional banking system. You know, you see it all the time, or they end up paying a small fine and then everything just moves forward. But the big banks in this country have been getting away with things far too long, and Basel III is going to change that. Caroline Ellison is finally getting sentenced over FTX's collapse. I wonder what she's going to get out of this. Most likely a slap on the wrist, because I'm sure she also gave up a lot on Sam Bankman-Fried as well. But you know what else she has in the chamber that she could use as leverage? I'm sure she has a hell of a lot of dirt on Tether. Tether had a lot of ties to FTX. Justin Mora, CEO, says Bitcoin is a national security concern for this country. Take a listen to this.
Bitcoin is a national security concern for this country. Russia is the world's second largest Bitcoin mining nation. Countries that operate on a Bitcoin standard from a perspective of transacting and holding Bitcoin can transact outside of the sanctions environment. They can transact outside of government controls. If the US does not have a substantial amount of Bitcoin mining onshore, they can be locked out, and US companies can be locked out of transacting their Bitcoin. So strategic ownership of block space is of a national security concern. And that's why with 40% of global Bitcoin mining in the US must maintain dominance, not just in Bitcoin mining, but also in the holding of Bitcoin assets in US companies, whether they're ETFs, whether they're Bitcoin mining companies, whether it's MicroStrategy. But the US must maintain dominance, because by the same reason the US holds 40% of the gold reserves in the world, they can exert influence in financial markets. They have to do that as the world transitions to digital currencies.
So you could look at that as being bullish for Bitcoin on one hand, but on the other hand, you got to look at the fact that if we don't remain dominant when it comes to Bitcoin, then they will turn their back on Bitcoin. They will go in a different direction. And I think this is what it's leading up to. We are pushing into a new financial system, and everybody knows it's coming. So right now, they're putting all these concerns out there around Bitcoin all of a sudden. And at the same time, you have Michael Saylor hyping it up. Something is wrong there. I just don't know exactly what it is. And even the SEC warns of Bitcoin and Ether ETF risk, labels Bitcoin, ETH highly speculative investments. And people wanted an ETF for XRP. I said, we don't need an ETF for XRP. It's not going to help the price of XRP, and even the Bitcoin maxis think that the ETFs hurt Bitcoin more than they helped. They still think that Bitcoin would be at an all-time high right now if it wasn't for the ETFs. And I think they might be right because of this right here. BlackRock may not have one-to-one backing on their Bitcoin ETF, and Coinbase is playing their game. Transactions are recorded off-chain and in cash. All that Bitcoin is fake US dollars. And you see it coming from Coinbase themselves. So this means they can borrow Bitcoin from Coinbase to short and are not required to show any proof they hold one-to-one. There's also a 2 to 30 day settlement. All settlements are done in cash. So I think BlackRock is manipulating the price of Bitcoin. And I think a lot of Bitcoin maxis would agree with that. And that's why I'm saying BlackRock got involved in this space at the perfect time for a reason. Because this is what's actually coming. Former Goldman Sachs executive says central banks are dragging the dollar just long enough to bring in a new system that consolidates all the world's money. Take a listen to this.
For many decades, the dollar has been the reserve currency, and the system is what I would describe as long in the tooth. And the central bankers are trying to bring in a new system, but it's not ready to go yet. And we're in a period of great change and uncertainty where the central bankers are trying to keep the dollar system going and accelerate. So they're trying to lengthen the dollar system, and then they're trying to accelerate bringing in the new system. So I describe the new system as the end of currencies. So we're not bringing in a new currency. We're essentially bringing in a new transaction system that will be all digital and essentially end currencies as we know them.
So it's going to end currencies altogether is what she's saying. And that makes sense. Like I've been telling you all this time, something is propping up the system. There's no way we could just keep adding more and more debt. And it makes sense that they're dragging out the dollar as long as they can while they're accelerating into the digital age. Remember, I kept telling you, things are really picking up speed all of a sudden. It's noticeable at this point. Key regulatory and industry initiatives are driving payments transformation. So if you really want to know when the new financial system is going to go live, here's your cheat sheet right here. Because you see, they talk about MiCA, digital ID frameworks, confirmation of pay, new payment architecture, and they show you everything is supposed to be all completed by 2026. That's why I said if I had to put a time frame on this, it's going to happen sometime mid-2025 to the end of 2026. It's going to be one long transition period where you start to see every single country going live with a CBDC, almost like an overnight event. And cross-border payments at that time with SWIFT and RippleNet, real-time payments, things are going to be picking up a lot of momentum. So at the same time, we're going to have an alt season. And I think we're going to watch utility start to drive the price of these cryptocurrencies. You see why I'm so freaking bullish about XRP all the time and XLM and these utility-driven cryptocurrencies? Because I see it coming now. It's clearly right there in front of you. You want to get to a 3-digit XRP? Most likely it's going to happen at some point in 2025. And look at what's going on right now. Bank crisis. Allied warns of consumer defaults. JP Morgan warns of recession. Goldman Sachs is heavily leveraged on the wrong side of the yen, carry trade, and Nvidia. So you see it right here. Nothing looks good for the banks. And Mike Crisco put this into perspective, what happened with Basel III, that meeting that happened today. When the banks become illiquid on October 1st, the Fed is not going to save the banks. The Fed will let the banks collapse before it lets the dollar hyperinflate. There's not going to be any bailouts this time around. Now you see why the FDIC was talking about bail-ins, because the Fed doesn't have a backup plan this time. Maybe they print some money to get us to the election, but that's the best you can hope for coming from the Fed. The U.S. banks aren't Basel III compliant by October 1st. The rest of the world will not recognize the dollar as a medium of exchange, trade. Either way, it's going down. And Basel III is not slowing down either. They're not going to make changes for Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. And that's why I said I could see why JP Morgan teamed up with Neum because of this right here. Take a listen.
One of the things we all have to remember is that the value of a token over the long term is really going to be derived by its utility. What problem is it solving? How big is that problem? How many customers do you have? There's no question there's a lot of hype in this system, and I don't actually think that's a good thing. For Ripple, we use this digital asset called XRP to settle liquidity needs between banks. So today there's $27 trillion parked at different banks around the world so they can make payments between each other. Our view is you can use a digital asset like XRP to do that in real time. Because XRP has been so efficient, it settles a transaction about 3 seconds compared to Bitcoin.
So it just passes through that currency for that period of time.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that is what JP Morgan needs, that on-demand liquidity. Every one of those banks are going to need XRP. And I think this is going on already in the background. I think Ripple is most likely already tying in with a lot of the US banks because the SEC case was meant to do one thing, slow Ripple down until the right time. And I think the right time is here. It's going to happen over the course of the next couple months. Things can change very fast with the banks. Once the elections are done and everything's done and over with, I think we're going to be facing a lot of big problems because I think everything is just being propped up. You could see it. Even the Fed, all of a sudden, with all these numbers, with inflation and everything else, those numbers are made up numbers. Nobody's believing it anymore. The Fed, unlikely to cut rates by 50 basis points at any of its 3 remaining meetings this year, say 54 of 71 economists. So a lot of people are saying the Fed might not cut rates. That's not good. We want a rate cut because that would be great for crypto. The problem is a rate cut also puts us in jeopardy of more inflation at the same time. So you got to weigh out the two. No matter what, we're going to watch crypto start to take off either way. The SEC view on SAB 121 remains the same. The SEC under Biden-Harris will continue to prevent banks from the digital asset sector through this unlawful act. Now, I have a theory for SAB 121. I think the SEC is doing this right now because there's no regulations yet. So they don't want the banks getting involved with digital assets yet until they clear the road. In other words, they want to put regulations in place, get rid of 99% of crypto, and then what's left, they will pass SAB 121 and allow the banks to work with that handful of cryptocurrencies. I think the SEC has been dragging this on for that purpose alone, because everything is going to be centered on the cryptocurrencies that are ISO compliant. The people on X, all those retail investors will tell you ISO is nothing. But ISO, there's only a handful of compliant cryptocurrencies for a reason. Why do they need to be compliant at all if ISO didn't matter? It matters, and it's going to matter a lot over the coming months as we watch the banking system fall apart and banks are starting to get involved with XRP and XLM. The trade, wait until digital trade amps up all around the world. XDC is going to move all of that trade money. Q&T is also getting tied in as well, because Q&T is going to be like the glue holding the entire new financial system together. Beyond that, you're going to have HBAR as a major player, Algo, IOTA. You see it happening already. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Could you imagine what's going on behind the scenes? But absolutely, a new system is coming. I think it'll be completed by the end of 2026. Before 2026, though, XRP is going to make a lot of different price moves, in my opinion. I think we're going to see $27 initially, then maybe a pullback unless utility starts kicking in. But 3 digits, most likely sometime next year. I think we're that close. But until it happens, stay patient, stay positive, and let's get rich together. With that said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of you. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.